Anthony Kiedis was a no-show. This is some of the goofiest stuff we've ever seen. He was stoked about that.
É isso mesmo que vocês acabaram de ver, meus amigos. Nesse vídeo aqui, vocês vão assistir a uma entrevista exclusiva com o lendário vocalista Keith Morris, das lendárias bandas Black Flag, Circle Jacks e Off. Você não vai encontrar essa entrevista, irmão, em lugar nenhum, em canal nenhum. Pode procurar em qualquer lugar. Essa entrevista que ele deu, só aqui no canal Distúrbio Sonoro, tá bom? Quem fez essa entrevista foi o nosso amigo e colaborador do canal, Marco Casado de Santos. Muito obrigado, Marco. E sem mais enrolação, vamos lá para a entrevista. Deixa seu like, sua inscrição, a sua notificação, porque toda semana tem vídeo novo para você, tá bom? Vamos para a entrevista.
E hoje a gente vai ter uma exclusiva aí com o ícone do punk rock mundial, o Keith Morris. Foi vocalista da banda Panic, do fim dos anos 70. E em 78 essa banda mudou o nome para Black Flag, então oficialmente ele foi o primeiro vocalista da banda Black Flag. Em 79 ele saiu do Black Flag e montou uma banda chamada Circle Jerks, que é uma banda mega respeitada no circuito do punk rock mundial. E tudo isso aconteceu no cenário da Califórnia, em Los Angeles. E então, em 2010 ele montou uma outra banda chamada Off. Keith, beleza?
Bom, Marco.
Primeiramente queria te agradecer por essa entrevista aí, eu sei que teu tempo é bem curto, tá? Então, muito obrigado, tá? Valeu.
Oh, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. Thank you for your time.
Keith, para começar, poderia contar, por favor, pra gente aquela história curiosa que aconteceu contigo quando você substituiu o Anthony Kiedis na banda Red Hot Chili Peppers num show em Los Angeles aí nos anos 80?
That happened at a place called the Olympic Auditorium. And the bill that night was Suicidal Tendencies, SSD from Boston, the Minutemen, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and there was one other band, but I forget who they were. Anyways, what happened was Anthony Kiedis was a no-show. We'd heard that he had been arrested for jaywalking. He had an outstanding warrant for his arrest. So anyways, I'm backstage hanging out with Flea and Cliff Martinez, and everybody's like real jittery, everybody's on edge because it's a really big show. There's like 3,000 people there, 3,000 or 4,000 people. There could have been more because the room holds 5,000 people, and Suicidal Tendencies at that time were really, they were really popular. Anyways, everybody's pacing around. They're wondering where Anthony is, why he hasn't bothered to contact anybody or call anybody. And about 10 minutes before they're supposed to go on stage, Flea comes up to me and asks me if I'll join him on stage. And I don't know any of their lyrics. And what happens, because I've done about $200 or $300 worth of cocaine, I'm completely out of my mind. I've been drinking all day, so I was a rubberhead. I was out of my mind. And so they broke into the first song. I started jumping around. I grabbed the mic. I started screaming and yelling. Like I said, I did not know any of their lyrics. So the line that I kept continually repeating all night was, "What you see is what you get." Now, the really cool part about all of this was the fact that Flea knew all of the lyrics. So Flea pretty much sang as much as he could. And I guess I was just there to jump around and look ridiculous and make them look cool or whatever it was. And we would later find out, I'm not going to tell you what happened to Anthony, but we would eventually find out what had happened to him. He'd fallen asleep on one of his friend's couches.
Oh, so it's awesome. It's awesome story.
Well, they were on their ascent, which meant they were starting to do this. They were starting to, become one of the biggest bands in the world. But this was they had just started to learn to walk. They hadn't started running yet. They were close to starting to be able to run, but they were walking really fast.
Keith, conta pra nós a sua mudança de função ainda na banda Panic. Eu sei que o Greg Ginn, o guitarrista, te falou alguma coisa sobre você não ser mais o baterista, já que a princípio tu ia ser o baterista, né? E aí a função foi mudada assim. Como é que foi essa história? Conta pra nós.
Well, we had a situation where Greg Ginn and I were just starting out and we didn't know what we were going to do. And we had the conversation, we need to find a drummer. And I said, well, I know somebody that's got a drum kit for sale. I'll play drums. As it turns out, the drum kit was stolen from one of my friends by one of his friends, who was one of my friends, who was going to sell the drum kit to me for $300, which for a drum kit, that's pretty cheap. That's pretty inexpensive. Anyways, I realized that if I were to buy this drum kit, I would get beaten up in one part of town and dragged all the way to the other point of town and get beaten up again. So I didn't have a drum kit. And what happened was on a Saturday, we were all hanging out at the SST office, and Search and Destroy comes on the radio. Iggy and the Stooges, Search and Destroy. James Williamson, one of the greatest rock guitar players of all time. That starts blasting out of the speaker, and I jump up on one of the desks and I do like a triple flip off the desk and land on the couch that's sitting in the middle of the office. And then I jump up and leap off of one of the arms of the couch, and I'm flying through the air, and then I land on my face. Now, the entire time that I'm doing all of this acrobatic, gymnastic type stuff, I'm screaming my brains out. I'm screaming the lyrics. And I leap back up onto the arm of the couch and leap off again and land right on my face, and I pick myself up and I'm dusting all of the dirt off of me, and the song ends, and then Greg Ginn is just, he's cracking up. All of the guys that are in the office are just, this is ridiculous. This is some of the goofiest stuff we've ever seen. And Greg Ginn looks at him and said, you're not playing drums in Black Flag, you're going to be the vocalist.
Yeah.
And that's how he got the job.
This was the best choice.
Well, you can compare me to Henry Rollins, you can compare me to Des Cadena, you can compare me to Ron Reyes, and the way that it works is Ron Reyes is better than Des Cadena. Who's better than Henry? Who's better than I am, but I'm better than Ron, who's better than Henry, who's better than Des, and then Henry is better than Des, who's better than Ron, who's better than I am, but I'm better than Henry, who's better than Des and Ron. I don't know if you catch what I'm doing, but it's a play on words. It's a play on the scene. Each member of each vocalist for Black Flag brought their own personality to the job. And, you know, everybody seems to think that Henry Rollins is the best vocalist because he was on the majority of the albums. He was the one that toured with them. So a lot of people have the opportunity to see him and hear him.
Yeah.
So consequently, that makes him their favorite vocalist. Now, people constantly argue and bicker and go back and forth as to who's the best, but to me, each guy was as good as the guy that was before him.
Yeah, I agree.
After him.
Então, dando um pulo na linha do tempo, em 2010 tu criou a banda Off, que agora está no terceiro álbum, né, o Free LSD. E para celebrar o lançamento desse álbum, vocês estão fazendo uma tour mundial e vocês vão tocar aqui no Brasil em dezembro, no festival Primavera Sound. E vocês tocaram aqui a última vez em 2013. Queria saber se vocês lembram, se tu lembra dessa tour, o que aconteceu de curioso.
Did we play Porto Alegre? Was it? Or Curitiba?
São Paulo.
Well, we played Sao Paulo. Those guys, when we got through and it was time to head back to the hotel, it was just a massive party everywhere. And one of the guys discovered a new drink, so he was completely out of his mind because he'd had like 6 or 7 of these drinks, like a street drink. There were vendors set up in the street, people everywhere. I don't party, I used to. I'm 68 years old. I'm too old to be doing that. I did enough of that when I was younger. So I still have fun, but I don't have fun like the other guys do. One of the guys managed to find some Hollywood Happy powder. He was stoked about that. One of the guys has the ability to have a couple of drinks, have a couple of beers, and cut it off. He knows, you know, I can only go so far. And rather than completely destroy my brain, I'm gonna just teetotal. And what that means is, like I said, he has the ability to have a couple of drinks and leave it at that. So the club was great. We worked with a couple of guys. We worked with a couple of guys from Spain. Our road manager and sound guy they were both really great. One of the guys works with Primavera, who are putting on the big festival. So we're playing the big festival in Sao Paulo, Primavera.
Eu queria que tu fizesse um paralelo entre o antigo Off e o atual, porque houve uma troca de baixista, né? Eu queria saber qual a tua opinião a respeito.
The original lineup, we hit a wall. We were recording and something happened that wasn't supposed to happen, and Dimitri basically said he didn't want to do this anymore. And I had to figure out a way to keep the band from breaking up. So I had to fire one of the guys. And because I fired one of the guys, one of the other guys quit because of that. He didn't think it was fair. We were supposed to have this conversation as to why everything was so messed up. And in the meantime, Dimitri's telling me that he's not going to do it anymore. And it's just like, I don't have time to wait around to have a conversation as to why I fired who I fired and explaining that to the other guy who quit. Well, what happened was we'd written all of these songs. We'd recorded them with Del Crover from the Melvins. And then we recorded them with Mario Rubalcaba, who was the original drummer in Off, who was playing in Earthless and Rocket from the Crypt. And so the scheduling started to get weird. Dimitri was just, I think Dimitri just felt that it had run its course, and he was tired of having our schedule dictated to us by the other guys in the band. I had to do something to like make this right. So I went to Dimitri and I said, look, we've got to find a new bass player. We've got to find a new drummer. And in the process, Dimitri talked with Autry, who had been the bass player in a band called And You Will Know Us by the Trail of the Dead. And Autry didn't even have to think about it. When Dimitri asked him to play with us, he said, you're my favorite band. Why would I not want to play with you guys? So now we have a drummer. We have a bass player. We had been playing with a drummer, a guy named Brian, who played in a band called Retox, who was Justin from the Locusts' other hardcore band. And Brian, there was a situation with Brian where he said a bunch of things that he shouldn't have said. And so it was like, we're glad that we had this happen now, rather than a year down the road when we're on tour somewhere and we're finding out that he's got a really bad part of his personality that we would not want to deal with. So it was easier to deal with it before we had even recorded with the new lineup.
Como é que veio a ideia de fazer o álbum conceitual, esse álbum conceitual junto com o filme, o filme Free LSD?
Well, the whole idea with this newest project was that we needed to do something different, because we, being in a punk rock hardcore band, after a while, it's almost like you're playing the same thing over and over and over again. It seemed like we were dealing in black and white. If you look at the album covers, the first 3 recordings, the artwork on the album covers is black and white. We were hanging out with Raymond Pettibone, who has done the artwork for our jackets, and noticed that he was at the time working with color, working with watercolors. So we thought, you know what, we are going to try to make a more colorful record, rather than just everything being in black and white, everything just being, well, this is hardcore and this is what we do and this is the way that it is, and we don't know any better, and we don't know how to make a detour. We don't know. We're we're on this one-way street. We don't know to make a left or a right, to go here or there. So Dimitri and I made a conscious effort to move out of the box that we were in. Dimitri was listening to, he's always listened to industrial music. So you hear bits and pieces of industrial music, like in the breaks between songs. All of these different pedals, all of these different effects. Dimitri's having me listen to industrial bands. Well, I have a couple of their records. It's just I don't sit around listening to it. I might pull it out once a year, once every couple of years. So we were listening to Eisenzehnte Neubauten. We were listening to Throbbing Gristle. I have a couple of their records. I'm familiar with Throbbing Gristle. I love Throbbing Gristle. But he made us dive deeper into it. We listened to a band called Hunting Lodge, who is our friend Scott, who happens to be one of Dimitri's neighbors out in Claremont. So while we're creating these songs, we're listening to this different music, and we're making friends with people that live out in his community. And one of the guys is Henry, who goes by the name, his stage name is Enid Snarb, who plays in a band called Amps for Christ, if you can even call it a band. He's just a really, really great guitar player. And he was telling us of all of these different groups and all of these different individuals that were making recordings. And so we have bits and pieces of this industrial stuff going on, this electronic stuff going on. But Enid Snarb also told us, we asked him, so what's your favorite record? What would be a great record for us to listen to for like a different kind of influence? And he turned us on to a Ravi Shankar record that when George Harrison first went to India, he was doing his soul searching. He went to see the guru, the Maharishi, I forget what his name is, but in his travels in India, one of the first guys he met was Ravi Shankar. And so George Harrison was interested in sitar, which starts showing up on Beatles albums after he comes back from India. So we're listening to this Indian orchestra that's led by Ravi Shankar. And I love that music. I love sitar. And in our conversations between Dimitri and I, he said, so why don't you name an album that you would, a recording that you would want to use as a starting point, or what are you highly influenced by, or what is your favorite record? And I don't really have a favorite record, but I said the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And so you can hear just slight traces of that on Free LSD. Dimitri said, you know, Keith, you're always socially aware, you're politically conscious, you're always writing about, you know, your lyrics always contain something about us versus them, or the Republicans versus the Democrats, or all of that type of stuff. And he said, we are going to need to go to some different places. And so while we're sitting there, Dimitri tells me, you've already written probably half of the lyrics for the album without knowing that you've written the lyrics. And I said, well, how so? And he said, you have a podcast. I was doing a podcast with my friend Pete Weiss, who's my neighbor. Pete was the drummer in a band called Thelonious Monster. One of the guys that's sitting at the table next to Pete says, you and Keith, you have this really cool rapport. Our podcast basically was based on conspiracy theories. Do UFOs exist? Like on the cover of the album. One of the conspiracies was CIA mind control, going back to the 60s, when we had bands like the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield and the Mamas and the Papas and Steppenwolf and Buffalo Springfield and Love and the Doors. Pete and I had created this podcast. We had talked about Atlantis. We had talked about HARP, which is it's a system our scientists have developed to recreate weather or cause earthquakes. Does this exist? Who killed Marilyn Monroe? And then going into those places, we start going back to the CIA. We did 50 episodes. So that's 50 conspiracy theories that we went into. So anyways, getting back to the lyrics and getting back to the album and how Dimitri and I created what we created.
E Keith, a respeito do filme, a gente teve uma estreia no Slam Dance Festival no início do ano, com a participação do Jack Black, do David O, do Jesus Lizard, dos Anders Sloss, do Circle Jerks, do J.D. Pellegro, do Dead Kennedys, nosso saudoso J.D. Pellegro. Queria saber qual a intenção de vocês com relação a esse material. Vocês vão lançar esse filme em formato DVD, Blu-ray, streaming? Qual que é qual o plano de vocês para esse filme?
Well, the movie needs a couple more things done to it. It's there's a 7.5 minute cut that they make for distributors and people at movie companies, because a lot of these people don't have time to watch an entire movie, which that's kind of crazy because they're in the movie business. But that's showbiz, so I can't speak for them. But basically, the cut shows the entire movie, just like some of the best parts of the movie, just so that the people that are shopping it have an idea as to what they've got in their hands. And the way that these people work, it's once somebody says they want it, and the lawyers do all of the lawyering and bickering and the going back and forth. It normally, once the paper's signed, it takes 6 months for the movie to whatever's going to happen with it to happen. If it's going to go to Netflix, if it's going to go to Hulu, if it's going to go to Showtime, if it's going to go to HBO, if it's going to go to Prime, if it's going to get picked up by a major motion picture company and they're going to put it out in movie theaters. It all remains to be seen. It's pretty much out of our hands.
Deixa uma mensagem aí pros fãs do Brasil aí.
Have fun. Be good. Think about what you're doing. It's okay to go out and do some ridiculous things. It's okay to go out and do a few stupid things, but learn from all of it and just progress as a person. Lighten up. Don't freak out.
Ok, Keith. Muito obrigado por essa entrevista. Eu sou muito grato pelo seu tempo. Sei que o seu tempo é muito curto, tá? Então, muito obrigado. E um abraço, meu amigo.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Marco. Thank you.
See you here in Brazil.
Right on.
E aí, meus amigos, valeu ou não valeu a pena, hein? Que entrevista, que história, quanta história, né, cara? Quanta coisa a gente fica sabendo numa entrevista dessa. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Mais uma vez, Marco, muito obrigado aí pela colaboração com o nosso trabalho, tá bom? E eu conto com vocês aí com as suas inscrições, com seus likes, com as suas notificações aí, porque toda semana tem vídeo novo no canal. Deixa seu comentário se você gostou dessa entrevista e manda ideia pra gente fazer mais vídeo aí pra vocês, tá bom? A gente se vê no vídeo da semana que vem. Valeu!